Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. We're getting more details about the guy who opened fire at an Oregon community college yesterday, killing 9 people, and also about the stockpile of weapons he had in his possession. We're going to cover this distinctively tonight, but for more on the very latest on this, let's go live to Lauren Lister. She joins us out of Roseburg, Oregon with the very latest.
10 people are dead, including the shooter. We now know all of their identities and ages. 6 patients remain in the hospital, and we're learning more about the gunman and the survivors.
The gunman's apartment complex today still guarded by police, and residents remain on edge.
It was scary when you first heard about the shooting, but it's different when you find out that he lived next door to you.
ATF reporting 7 weapons were recovered here at the shooter's residence where he lived with his mother, 6 at the school where the shooting took place.
They were all purchased legally.
Families of the victims bracing for the worst.
These families are currently living through the nightmare in the most personal way possible.
The governor today expressing pride in the community.
I am proud of how the Roseburg community pulled together to care for and comfort each other during this horrific crisis.
The suspected shooter, identified as 26-year-old Chris Harper Mercer, is seen here in his MySpace photo. He allegedly opened fire on campus at Umpqua Community College late Thursday morning.
We've got multiple gunshot wounds.
Police officers facing off with the gunman.
Exchanging shots with him. He's in the classroom.
But today, tales of heroism emerging. Witnesses say 30-year-old student and Army vet Chris Mintz charged straight at the gunman, trying to save who he could. He's out of surgery now, recovering from 7 gunshot wounds, seen here in this photo from his GoFundMe page.
We're learning a little more about the gunman. The Army confirms he served over a month in basic training back in 2008 before being discharged. Authorities are still looking for the motive, and the school remains closed. Lauren Lister, ABC News, Roseburg, Oregon.
Thank you very much, Lauren. And tonight, we are dedicating just about the entire program to the issue of gun violence and the crisis that it is in America. Now, we're going to talk to 2 lawmakers, one an area senator and the other an area representative, who are trying to do something about it, but quite frankly, keep getting hit by a brick wall by some counterparts in the legislative branch. Now, we're also going to take a look at, frankly, how predictable and routine these tragedies have become. Mass shootings and how the aftermath is always the same. Big talk, but sadly little action. Then we're going to have some eye-opening numbers that put the problem into perspective and also, frankly, disprove that myth here that, hey, if we just armed everybody, these things could be avoidable. Now, a bit later, we'll also play a big chunk of what I thought was one of the more passionate and raw speeches from this president on the subject of guns and the need for more control of them last night. Here's a shorter clip to get you started.
We spend over $1 trillion and pass countless laws and devote entire agencies to preventing terrorist attacks on our soil, and rightfully so. And yet, we have a Congress that explicitly blocks us from even collecting data on how we could potentially reduce gun deaths. How can that be?
A fair question, I think, at least. Now, a short time ago, we spoke with Senator Richard Blumenthal, the senator from Connecticut, about all of this and more. Okay, instead of spending all the time stating what I think is the obvious, that this is insane and we keep doing this perpetual gnashing of the teeth as to how this could have happened, the president said this is politics, this should be politicized, we need a solution, and obviously he pointed to Washington for that. Easier said than done. Do you see a pathway really that we can finally do something about this and just get a universal background check? Or frankly, it's going to be the same old, 6 months from now, we're going to be in the same place with exactly the same legislation we have now?
My feeling is that there's no alternative to continuing the fight because we face a public health crisis, a real public safety emergency, much like we would with any epidemic, because gun violence takes tens of thousands of lives every year, literally 30,000 lives probably every year. And there have been 142 shooting incidents in schools, murders, since the tragedy at Sandy Hook in Newtown, Connecticut. So this problem continues, and there are common sense solutions to it, like background checks, as you mentioned. Universal background checks is a common sense, sensible measure that the majority of Americans and even the vast majority of gun owners support.
Finally, before I let you go, it was common knowledge that the last time, after the last huge tragedy that we saw in Newtown, the president made his speech, but then he left it to Congress to try and work it out. And as you said, there was a plurality that had it, but not enough to put over the finish line with that 60% threshold. That said, and we all heard what the president said last night, should it be he who carries the torch on this one, or should again he leave it to the Senate and the House to try and work out sensible gun control legislation that has a chance of passing? Who should really push this the most?
Has to be a partnership, because the president's leadership is necessary, and he led on the measure that was put before the Congress during the last session. He was at the forefront. I sat with him as he sat with the loved ones of Sandy Hook victims and brought them, in fact, down to Washington, D.C., so they could talk to members of the Senate as well as the House of Representatives seeking to push these measures. So he has helped to lead. At the end of the day, it's the senators and congressmen who have to vote first. He simply has to sign the law, and that's why the initiative probably belongs with Congress. And the failure to act on Congress's part makes it complicit in inaction and inertia.
Well, Senator, I certainly appreciate a few minutes from you, and I know that obviously a subject you're very invested in. I wish you the best. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Now, let's be honest. We keep talking about this same thing just about every month, and really what gets changed. Sure, in states like Connecticut and New York, things do, but overwhelming states across this country, gun sales have only gone up since the tragedy of Sandy Hook, and I don't even know what's going to happen now after what we saw in Oregon. Now, the numbers overwhelmingly, though, show that we have a very unique and insidious gun problem in America compared to every other Western nation, frankly. We're going to take a look at that and a lot more when our coverage continues of the campus shooting.
The teacher came running in and only told us to get inside the teacher's office and get down as fast as we could and drop everything.
I hear screaming after that first gunshot, and then I looked out and I saw the people running.